I used to think tracks only ran one-way steel. Schedule, destination. Like if you kept your ticket and your head down, the night would deliver you clean to morning. That was before the Night Meridian, before Carriage 7, before I learned the ways a person can leave you while sitting 3 feet away behind a sliding door. My wife's name is Mara. We boarded the sleeper in the city with identical hard-shell suitcases and different reasons for traveling. She said we needed time away from our apartment and its arguments with the plumbing. I said I needed to attend my uncle's memorial 2 countries east. Both were true and neither was the story. The Night Meridian leaves at 1910, right when the station swallows commuters and exhaled announcements. We stood on the platform with paper cups of tea we didn't drink. Mara wore the blue coat I bought her when we still gave winter as a favor to each other. She watched the electronic board flicker from local to delayed to boarding like it was trying out identities. When the train slid in a long silver sentence, the wind whipped a candy wrapper into the air and pressed it against her leg like a small, unwanted attention. "You sure about this?" I asked. "For the train and the marriage, and the way a person can sit opposite someone for hours without telling the truth?" She smiled the smile you give border guards and disappointed parents. "It's a train," she said. "You get on and get off." Our compartment had 2 bunks, a small sink, and an optimism about knees. The attendant showed us how the table folded out of the wall, like a secret we were allowed to know. He gave us tickets for dinner in the dining car. He told us the train would go dark for 7 minutes at the border tunnel because of regulations. He pronounced regulations as if he were promising a magic trick. We set our bags on the floor and stood silently, each deciding which side of the compartment we owned. Out the window, the platform choreographed itself. People pretending not to run, late apologies, lovers trying to be brief and failing at it. A boy with a red balloon looked up as if he could see the idea of going. When the train exhaled and moved, the tracks began their invisible work. Click hum, the sum of decisions made by engineers who did not know us. City became industrial, became fields holding the last light. Like a handful they were reluctant to let go. Mara watched until darkness made everything equal. It's strange what you remember from a night that changes your life. A paper napkin that said, "Dine with us" in a font too cheerful. The corridor's carpet pattern, little arrows pointing in both directions like the designer refused to commit. The way Mara's ring turned when she fiddled with it, a habit she picked up the year we almost moved and didn't. We went to the dining car 2015 because that's what the ticket asked of us. The car was a moving restaurant from a storybook white tablecloths, small lamps in cages pretending to be polite. A woman in a red scarf laughed 2 tables away like someone who had learned to accept gifts she didn't expect. A man in a suit ate with the economy of a person who hates to waste time, even with soup. The waiter recommended the fish. We both chose chicken. "Remember when we took the ferry?" Mara asked, as if the word remember could butter hard bread. "You said the sea smelled like pennies in the future." "I was trying to be romantic," I said. "You were trying to be forgiven," she said gently, and I could have been angry if not for the accuracy. After dinner, she said she needed to walk. I said I needed to sit. We understand each other's cover stories too well. We respect them to keep peace. She went forward. I stayed and watched the lamps semaphore their tiny truce down the length of the car. When I went back to our compartment, the window held only my face and the interior of a man who does not know how to ask the right question. Mara returned with cheeks that had learned something cold. She sat on the lower bunk and unzipped her bag and took out a book she didn't open. "The attendant says the border tunnel is at 0217, she said. "He says the dark always makes people whisper." "What will you whisper?" I asked. "Depends on who's listening," she said. I brushed my teeth with the tiny hotel-sized toothpaste from our building superintendent's Christmas basket, as if mint could protect me from whatever happened between compartments at night. Mara changed into a long t-shirt that belonged to another season. She climbed to the top bunk because she likes the sense of being the last thing before the ceiling. I lay below with my hands behind my head and counted the stations we passed through by smell diesel, damp wood, something floral where the tracks ran close to a factory that manufactured the idea of spring. Sometime after midnight, the train slowed, the way a body pauses before telling a hard truth. We weren't at a station. The corridor lights dimmed and then extinguished, as promised. The dark was not nothing, it was presence. I could feel the outline of the compartment more than see it. The air hummed as if remembering a note it had been asked not to sing. Above me, Mara moved. The thin ladder creaked in a code we both knew. She stepped down lightly and paused, bare feet on the metal like a punctuation mark. I heard the soft slide of the compartment door, the muffled click as she pulled it to. I did not jump up. I counted to 20 like a child in a game he pretends he doesn't care about winning. On 21, I stood, opened the door, and entered the night the way you step onto a stage too early. The corridor was a long, narrow mirror. Emergency strips in the floor glowed the color of an argument you haven't had yet. In the distance, I heard a human thing. A laugh swallowed. I turned toward the forward cars because that's where Mara had gone. A breath of cold came in when someone further up opened and closed a door between carriages. My feet kept time with the train. Carriage 6 smelled like oranges. Carriage 5 smelled like old wool. At the end of Carriage 4, a small lobby opened between cars, a space where wind sneaks in at joints and people check their phones, not because they expect reception, but because habits prefer repetition to logic. Through the narrow window in the door to Carriage 3, I saw the glow of a small lamp. The lounge car. The lounge at night is different. In daylight, it's a place for children to spill fruit juice and retirees to hold conversations the game of cards does not require. At night, it's confessional. Half the lamps are off, and the ones that remain conspire to make faces look cast in opinions. One man slept, head back, mouth open in a dangerous trust. Two students leaned over a laptop, their mutual gravity louder than any soundtrack. At a table by the far window, in a shadow that asked to be misinterpreted, sat Mara and a man I recognized without knowing him. He wore a coat too light for winter and a scarf the color of running water. His hair had lost an argument with sleep. He held a paper cup with both hands, not to drink, but to keep them from saying what his face might. When he saw me, he did not start. He nodded once, as if we had a deal none of us remembered making. Mara, I said, and in the saying I realized how little I say her name outside paperwork and photographs. She didn't flinch. Owen, she said, my name turning in her mouth like a coin. I know who he is, I said, because it was obvious in the way details add themselves up when your brain is hungry to solve pain. He was the man from her office who laughed too much at her jokes. He was the neighbor who held her elbow when the elevator lurched. He was the guy in the photograph from the gallery opening, hand not quite on her spine. He was everyone you don't want your spouse to pick out of a crowded room because you instantly understand their grammar together. His name is Leo, Mara said, because names insist. It doesn't matter, I said. It matters to me, she said. Then say it. He's leaving, she said, at the border. Everyone's leaving at the border, I said, but her eyes asked me to remember that some departures are verbs. Leo set down his cup. I can go, he said to her, not to me. You don't owe anyone a performance. You don't have to, she said, which is the sentence you use on people you have rehearsed with. I sat, not at their table, in the seat opposite, an angle that turns strangers into a triangle. The lamp made a small island out of us. The rest of the lounge car receded into a country where nothing dangerous ever happens until it does. Why here, I asked. Why now? Because moving is easier, Mara said, because the train is already leaving everything. And because the dark makes people whisper, Leo said, as if repeating a line he'd been assigned. I wanted to hate him. I could not. He had the wrong energy for villainy. He looked like a man who had already paid for the coffee he spilled on someone else's coat. His mouth made small jokes at itself and then refused to deliver them. He wore a scar on his wrist with the indifference of a childhood injury that became a calendar. Are you sleeping with my wife? I asked, blunt because the corridor had taught me the value of not tripping on your own options. No, he said, and I believed it in a way that infuriated me. Did you want to? I asked. Yes, he said, with a kind of politeness I will never forgive. Mara closed her eyes and opened them, like the train had passed from one country to the next inside her. I asked him to meet me to say goodbye, she said, to make it a sentence instead of an ellipsis. You wrote to him on a separate phone, I said. You hid it in the sugar canister. She didn't ask how I knew. I wrote him on a separate phone because I wanted to be a person who didn't do damage in the daylight, she said. It turns out darkness is just practice. The lounge car stuttered over a joint in the track, and we all looked down like believers, pretending we were above superstition. In the small gravity that followed, Leo stood. I'm getting off at the border station, he said. I have a transfer. He looked at me the way a man looks at a dog that could bite and chooses not to. I'm sorry for the parts of this that are my fault, he said. He turned to Mara. Don't finish this conversation because he came to the lounge. Finish it because you decided to. He left. He did not look back. People like to imagine they would make an argument at the door. Most people leave with less theater than they deserve. Mara and I sat in the tiny weather that followed. The lamp hummed. The sleeper beyond our bubble continued with its business of transporting other people's nearlies. After a long time, the attendant walked by, saw our faces, and kept walking faster. In that way, hospitality workers learn from nurses. What do you want to ask? Mara said finally. Did you love him? I asked, because I am unoriginal when injured. I loved the person I was in the sentences I sent him, she said. She was a better writer than the person I am with you. She told the truth before it was polite. Did you plan to meet him at the border? No, she said. And then, like a correction, yes, but not to go with him. To end it where going is the theme. You could have ended it in our kitchen, I said. The kitchen is where we store olive oil and grudges, she said. We make lists there. We make rules there. The train is the only place I could put motion under what should have been a decision months ago. How long? I asked, the smallest and worst of all questions. 3 months, she said. How many messages? One, I asked, proving there is, in fact, a bottom to dignity. Enough that I stopped keeping track, she said. Enough that the number would make you focus on arithmetic instead of meaning. The train began to slow. The window turned into a sheet of our own faces. A loudspeaker popped like a bottle that didn't want to be opened. A polite voice said, in 2 languages, that we would be stopping for 9 minutes to change crews. The lights rose in that way only trains and churches can do, revealing all the things you were proud of hiding. The border station was a platform in the middle of a doctrine. A glass booth held 2 officials who believed in stamps. The air that sneaked in at the door smelled like cold metal and other people's departures. Mara stood. Walk with me to the vestibule, she said. We moved down the corridor like neutrals. At the door between cars, she took my hand and placed it on the steel handle that says, do not open while moving, as if she needed me to feel the instruction. I didn't fall in love with him, she said. I fell in love with the possibility of a version of me that used better verbs. You used to use them with me, I said, and I did not mean verbs. I did, she said. Then we began speaking in bullet points. You started asking what the plan was for Thursday. I started answering with grocery items. He asked what I wanted, and I forgot to be frightened of wanting. Do you want him now? I asked. No, she said. I want to stop writing to people in compartments because the rooms in our apartment feel hostile to honesty. That is a very specific desire, I said. It is a start, she said. On the platform, Leo walked past our window. He did not look in. He folded his ticket like a letter he'd written to the wrong address. His shoulders were the right size for someone else's life. I surprised myself by not hating him. Hating would have been a relief I hadn't earned. Back in our compartment, we lay on opposite bunks and listened to the absence of the border. When the train moved again, the dark swung back like a curtain. This time, neither of us left. I did not sleep. I kept rehearsing the courtroom questions I would ask in a different marriage, in a more cinematic version of this night. At 03:10, I climbed to her bunk and asked if I could lie there. She moved without words. We lay like parentheses around the same breath. In the gray that trains make between night and morning, Mara told me the worst part. It wasn't the messages. It wasn't the meetings I didn't know about. It was the story she'd written about me to make the messages feel necessary. I made you a list of failures, she said, and started to recite it, as if I were a board that required slides. I put my hand over her mouth not to silence, but to change the mode. Ask me, I said. Stop writing about me and ask me. What do you want? She asked, and it was both too large and precisely right. Us, but in active voice, I said, and without footnotes. She said, what else? Rules, I said, Because fidelity prefers scaffolding to speeches. No other phones. If we need to talk at 1:13 a.m., we talk in the kitchen, and we make it look like a room that deserves true sentences. If you want to leave, you tell me on a morning we aren't moving, and we call it what it is, not a train. And you, she asked, because she knows my glide path to self-righteousness. I stopped giving you tasks when you offered me feelings, I said. I stopped writing lists and calling them love. We did not sign anything. There was no witness. The attendant brought coffee at 07 were washed in paper cups that said, "Have a nice day," as if days are things people choose while ordering at a counter. We drank on the lower bunk, knees touching the way grace introduces itself, shyly and then as if it lived here all along. We arrived at my uncle's town at 09:32. The station was handsome in the way grief likes clean lines, no obligations to be joyous. My mother met us with a coat she forgot to wear and instructions for where to stand and who not to hug first. At the memorial, people told stories about a man who kept parts for machines that didn't exist anymore because he believed in futures that circle back for what they need. I thought of the Night Meridian and our marriage and the way tracks can, in fact, lead in more than one direction if you learn to read the map without pretending you don't see the switches. After the service, Mara and I stood on a footbridge over the small river that runs behind the station, a tributary that doesn't know it feeds a larger thing. She leaned into me in that old way I had been too proud to miss. A commuter train slid beneath, the roof so close to the metal of the bridge I could have touched it if I were a man who liked sparks. "What are we now?" she asked. "Passengers," I said, "with assigned seats for the moment." "And when the lights go out?" she asked. "We stay," I said, "or we leave kindly, and not in tunnels." On the return journey 2 days later, the attendant was the same man. He recognized us in the way professionals do, without letting recognition disrespect privacy. He told us the border tunnel would go dark again. He asked if we wanted 2 dinners at the same seating, or to experiment with being interesting. "We'll eat together," I said. "In the lounge after," Mara added. We did. We spoke like people who had found a quiet car in a train that doesn't advertise it exists. We did not mention Leo because his name had done enough work. We did not talk about 113 because we had moved the habit into daylight. When the lights went down, we lay on the same bunk. She put her head on my shoulder and said, "Into the dark, that was no longer a rule. I'll ask you when I want a different life. I'll tell you when I'm becoming someone you should be wary of," I said. "Even if it's 113, she asked. "Especially then," I said. There was a small shudder as the train crossed the seam between countries. I imagined the engineers who placed this tunnel years ago, the arguments they had about where the line should run, the calculations that said this would be safe if the future obediently kept its promises. They were almost right. When the lights returned, Mara and I blinked. Our faces reassembled. The train carried us forward like we were as predictable as steel. The attendant passed with a cart of tiny waters, and I almost laughed because there is a kind of joy in being ordinary after you almost rewrote your life to be dramatic. At our home station, the same boy stood with a different balloon. He let it go. It kissed the underside of the roof and refused to rise. The wind tried to teach it how. The balloon decided it preferred this version of gravity. We got off the train holding our stupid identical suitcases. On the escalator, Mara's hand found mine. I didn't make the mistake of reading too much into that simple physics. I let my hand be held. She squeezed once, the code we use to say yes without writing the conditions. I squeezed back, the code that says yes, and also, I know. When people ask if the Night Meridian saved our marriage, I say no, and I mean it. Trains do not save, they deliver. The saving, if it is possible, happens in kitchens and lounges and between bunks. In the sentences we choose when the dark makes whispering easy and the day asks for articulation. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes the border guard in your chest stamps the wrong passport and you spend months living in a country you never meant to visit. But sometimes, if you're lucky and a little cruel with your comforts, you change trains on purpose and do not pretend you didn't see the schedule posted clearly in 2 languages for anyone who wanted to know the time. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you. It means a lot. New stories like this one are posted every single day, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one. And if this story touched you, please give it a like. It really helps more people find our content.